President Trump's border crackdown yielding major results. Border crossings plummeting to record lows in June. 25,000 total nationwide encounters recorded and just over 8,000 apprehensions. These are the lowest numbers in recorded CBP history. The Trump administration may also reopen Alcatraz as a federal prison, including housing illegal migrants who have committed crimes. Attorney General Pam Bondi and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum touring the facility yesterday. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
This was an idea of the president. He spoke about it in May, and he directed his administration to review a reopening plan for Alcatraz if it is possible, which is why the Attorney General and the Secretary of Interior have traveled there today. And just to follow up, Libby, on who the president wants to see housed in Alcatraz, the worst of the worst criminals in this country, both American criminals who convict heinous crimes, but also illegal alien criminals before deportation as well.
Well, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem in talks with 5 other Republican governors about building their own versions of the migrant detention center in Florida, known as Alligator Alcatraz. I want to bring in White House border czar Tom Homan. Tom, good morning. It's always great to speak with you, sir. The work that you're doing is incredible. And congratulations on the lack of apprehensions. I mean, to see these new numbers come from CBP is, I think, such a comfort to many Americans. What do you make, though, of this idea of Alcatraz in San Francisco becoming a place for illegals to be housed before they're deported?
Well, first of all, let me give credit to the most secure border in the history of this nation, to President Trump, his leadership, his executive orders, and the men and women of the Border Patrol, the 20,000 men and women standing on that front line every day, 24/7. So God bless them. They're out there doing America's work. Look, I'm with the president. I mean, we need detention beds. Thank goodness we got the big, beautiful bill passed, because right now we got about 59,000 in custody. But this morning I woke up, we got less than 400 beds available, 400 empty beds right now. We'll fill them, by noon. So we're constantly chasing our tail, trying to get as many removal flights as possible to clear up some more beds, so we can continue arresting the worst of the worst. So I'm with the president. We need the beds. We got to get the 100,000 beds, maybe even more. We have the money to do it. So we can't rest. We got to get out there right now, get as many beds as we can, as many transportation contracts as we can, both over the ground and in the air, and as many contractors as we can, and boots on the ground. Yeah. So we're not waiting. We're moving quickly.
Well, California's Alcatraz is a popular tourist attraction. I do want to say it, and I did hear Secretary Bondi say that basically or the Attorney General, that it would be expensive to switch it over. But what do you make of this idea of these other states that could do something similar to what they've done in Florida, which is Alligator Alcatraz? I mean, this facility was created very quickly, and many lawmakers have been down there. They said that it is safe. It is not, all of these, the Democrats yelling and saying it was going to be dangerous. It is not. But this is a way. What other states would you like to see give you the beds that you need to make sure that these deportations are carried out successfully and quickly?
I would like every state to step up, but they won't. I mean, I think the red states know that that's a place where we can have facilities, and the states have an interest in this too, because they got to understand criminal aliens are in every state in this country. MS-13 is now in every state of this country. TDA is in 41 states of this country. The border problem under Joe Biden wasn't just a Texas and Arizona problem. 97% of those across the border didn't stay in Texas and Arizona. They're in every city in this country. So we'd like every state to step up. So Governor DeSantis led on that. It's a great facility, and we'll build facilities that are at our detention standards. And if you look at the ICE detention standards, go to ice.gov and look at detention standards. We have the highest detention standards in the industry. I'll compare our detention standards to any state or federal facility in the country.
Well, I want to move to another issue with regards to the border, because ICE agents are facing a staggering, and we've talked about it this week on the program, 830% increase in assaults over the last year. Democratic lawmakers and state leaders are still pushing for legislation to unmask these ICE officers, even as agents are saying that they're being doxxed. Their families are being put in danger. These are documented threats against people trying to do their jobs. And Fox News' very own Matt Finn interviewed an ICE agent whose personal information was posted online. Watch what he told Matt.
my 3 kids, and she doesn't have the ability to protect herself like I do. Every night before my family goes to sleep, I sit with them, tell them everything's going to be okay. When they do end up falling asleep, I take it upon myself to walk around our house to make sure all the cameras are working, check everything, make sure it's powered up, and that's become the unfortunate routine now.
What do you make that, Tom? I mean, you've spoken about having to live apart from your family because you've had a barrage of death threats, but it's happening to these agents as well.
Like I do, I have 9 cameras on one house, 11 cameras on the other. But bottom line is, I'm the border czar. So I expect that. But the men and women who are out there serving this nation every day, 3 o'clock this morning, maybe you're not, but while most of us are sleeping, the men and women of ICE are out there in surveillance trying to arrest the worst public safety threats and national security threats. We're at a point now with those who enforce the law, the bad guys, and those who broke the law, the victims. And you're exactly right. Members of Congress have emboldened people on the left, the nuts, now are emboldened. If if a member of Congress can compare ICE to a terrorist group or to the Nazis, then I have the right to attack them and attack their families. So the members of Congress need to stop the rhetoric, because I said 2 months ago, if this rhetoric continues, there'll be bloodshed, and I was right. Unfortunately, I was right. A man was killed trying to attack a Border Patrol facility in Texas. In the same week, they tried to ambush ICE agents at a facility in El Dorado, Texas. And it's not over. We're going to see more of this unless the rhetoric stops. ICE is enforcing the laws that Congress enacted. If Congress doesn't like what ICE is doing, then change the law. They're not making this up. And as far as the other people ICE is arresting, they're arresting people that federal immigration judges ordered removed. Their job is to execute those orders. ICE is doing their job, making America safe every day. So the rhetoric needs to stop.
Doing their job. Very well said. Before you go, 5 Iranian nationals and 2 Uzbekistani nationals are all under arrest for trying to cross the northern border illegally. They've been detained. They're awaiting deportation, Tom. You've been warning about Iranian sleeper cells in the U.S.
And look, I'm glad they're apprehended. Another good thing about the big, beautiful bill, we can put more resources on that northern border. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough boots on the ground. We don't have enough technology. I've been working with the leadership of Canada about how we can better secure that border. The big, beautiful bill will give us more boots on the ground, more technology, and Canada's offering to make that border solid from the north-south. So we're working with them. We'll see where it goes, but all attention's on the northern border, and we understand that that's a vulnerability.
Tom, before you go, I have to say that, at 4 o'clock this morning, I was in Times Square, going through Times Square, coming to work. And you know what I saw for the first time in probably 3 years? Tourists walking around Times Square. Not Venezuelan gang members, Trinidad. I saw tourists enjoying the city of New York. That's because of the southern border being closed and the ICE agents, these men and women that are doing their job. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Tom Homan.
You got it.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll see you soon.
The Trump administration officially pulling the plug on California's Train to Nowhere, terminating $4 billion in federal funds for the high-speed rail project that never materialized. Our very own Max Gordon is in D.C. with the details. Max, my first vote when I was 18 was voting for this, and it's a disaster.
Yep, back in 2008, that's when Californians voted for it. And Californians have been waiting a long time for this train. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy calling it a boondoggle. Here he is earlier today.
It took 16 years and $15 billion in California high-speed rail to not lay one track. Are you kidding me? That's the American legacy right now. We can spend a lot of money and take a lot of time and not build projects.
The decision comes after a months-long federal review of the project. Originally approved by California voters back in 2008, the state's high-speed rail line was initially supposed to connect Los Angeles and San Francisco with an original completion date set for 2020. But years of delays and cost overruns have plagued the proposed bullet train. And while some infrastructure has been built, rail has yet to be laid down, with the latest focus now on completing a 171-mile section of line between the Central Valley cities of Merced and Bakersfield. Meanwhile, the estimated cost of the total project connecting LA to San Francisco has ballooned to around $135 billion, according to federal figures. More than $100 billion over the initially proposed cost of $33 billion. California Governor Gavin Newsom called the move to take away the promised federal funds illegal and said the state would fight it. In a statement, Newsom said Trump wants to hand China the future and abandon the Central Valley. We won't let him. And while the loss of federal funding is a big blow to the project, the majority of the funds are still coming from the state. Meanwhile, the CEO of the project is looking for a public-private partnership as California continues to try to push ahead. Back to you.
Max, thanks so much. Dagan, before we pivot, I want your reaction. My favorite quote was when the New York Times did a full investigation, and the French company that tried to do this was like, actually, never mind, we're going to go to Africa because Africa is less politically dysfunctional than California. And that bullet train in Africa is done under budget.
I love that.
There's a high-speed train in Florida that runs from Miami to Orlando that got done in a lickety-split compared to California. They can waste all the money they want to. They can be the political and financial disasters as long as it's Californians' money. Yeah. It's the fact that they were doling out, particularly under the Biden administration, just doling out billions of dollars to this just fiasco.
And he's so unctuous,
chaps my ass.
Isn't he so unctuous, Gavin Newsom? He comes up with a dopey excuse for everything. He's a pathetic politician and a jerk. And you know, what's interesting is that they want to build a high-speed railway to two cities that you don't really want to go to.
Hey.
L.A. and San Francisco?
Hey.
Yeah, Merced.
Hey.
Who wants to go to Merced?
But they had to change it.
I mean, you wanna,
well, it was originally supposed
homeless?
to be.
Let's go from homeless to homeless.
Wait, it was originally, let's look
the
at the map.
homeless encampments will flourish.
It was originally supposed to be all the way from San Fran down to Orange County. Oh. And then they had to change it. And you see that short little distance between Merced, where Taylor is from.
Thank you, born
to
and raised.
Bakersfield.
Where's Merced?
Right
Look
there
on
on
the
your
map.
screen, the Great 209. We have two viewers, mom and pops from there. Don't offend them.
Sprawling metropolis.
It was scaled back.
Won't this be like just a shuttle for homeless?
Wait, it was scaled back to operate between two destinations that nobody travels to. I love you, but
Oh, that's another one. Yeah, so
Merced
you agree with
is
me.
not San Fran.
Well,
It's the gateway to Yosemite, guys.
Won't this be just free transportation for homeless people to go from L.A. to San Francisco? Back
It's not in L.A. They scaled it back. It's not even anywhere near L.A. It's in Bakersfield.
I spoke a little bit ago with Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins and Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert Kennedy Jr. on how to make America healthy again. Please take a listen. All right, it's a big news day, but not only international and foreign policy in Ukraine and Russia, but also on the health side, very important. And joining me now, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thanks to both of you. I appreciate it very, very much. Mr. Kennedy, Secretary Kennedy, you'll be doing everybody a great favor. We will owe you a real debt of gratitude if you can get these petroleum-based dyes or other dyes out of the kids' diets, out of the school children's diets, and actually out of the adult diets, too. Can you do it, sir?
Yeah, and you know, Larry, when we came in 6 months ago, and we said we're going to get rid of the 9 petroleum-based synthetic dyes that are in our food that cause ADHD, that are associated with cancers and all kinds of a grim inventory of other health injuries, people laughed and they said we'd never be able to do it. But what happened today, which is the dairy industry, has now made a commitment to get rid of all dyes by the end of 2026. And some of them are already taking action. Some of them already gotten rid of the dyes. We now have, with this contribution, with this commitment, we now have about 40% of the food industry that's already made that commitment. And 35% of the food industry had already gotten rid of the dyes. So we're very proud of this public-private partnership. I'm very grateful for our partnership with Brooke and with our partnership with the industry. We cannot make America healthy again without the cooperation of the American farmers and American industry, and they are stepping up to the plate, and we're very grateful to them.
Well, and you know, Mr. Kennedy, I was listening to Marty McCary last night, your FDA commissioner, obviously, you talk about why it is that these kids now, kids growing up, are in such lousy health. And it has so much to do with what they're being fed. And this dye business, petroleum-based dye, even in ice cream, I got to tell you, I didn't know it was in ice cream until I read up on what you all were saying. I mean, it's really quite remarkable, but there's got to be an urgency to it, a real urgency to it.
There's urgency, and, you know, FDA also is stepping up to the plate. We've already approved fast track and approved in the last 2 months 3 new vegetable-based dyes. Today we approved a new vegetable-based dye, blue dye. So, you know, we're going to make sure that these companies and this industry has the supply chain so that they're able to get the products that they need to continue to meet the needs of their consumers, but in a way that keeps our children healthy.
And Madam Secretary Brookie Rollins, my dear friend, it's up to you, I guess, to implement this with respect to what, food stamps and school lunches and other things?
Well, that's right. And listen, this partnership we talk about a lot is unprecedented, never before in American history. Do you have an HHS secretary who is just simpatico? We talk almost daily, working together to make America healthy again. Bobby Kennedy understands more than anyone that you can't do that without American agriculture and the American farmer. Our announcement today outside on USDA steps. But to your point, Larry, USDA spends $400 million every single day on our nutrition programs, SNAP, prison programs, school lunches, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is a market mover in terms of what we're feeding America. So being able to ensure that our farmers, especially some of our smaller farmers, have the market in which to sell their locally homegrown produce, but also working with the big dairy producers, the ice cream makers, all of the above, to get the healthiest, best choices out into America. But especially as you're talking about, Larry, you know, 3 out of our 4 kids couldn't pass the military readiness test today. Something has to change, and Secretary Kennedy is leading the way, and we here at USDA are here to support him in every way we can.
So just to make it clear, I mean, can you get waivers and or change legislation, or was anything in the one big beautiful bill that would stop this? You know, food stamps, SNAP, school lunches, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you're the Lord High Executioner. He's the information guy on this. You're the Lord High Executioner. Can you execute this?
I have to say, I've never been called the Lord High Executioner before, Larry, but I love you so much. Listen, to your point, yes, USDA, and we've been working with some of our best governors across the country, Arkansas, Indiana, Iowa, Idaho, Tennessee, et cetera, to get the waivers put into place so that taxpayer dollars through SNAP are no longer buying sugary drinks and junk food, which is what a lot of the populations that rely on these food stamps, that was the #1 purchase within the food stamp program, was sugary drinks, $13 billion of about a $110 billion program. That is unsustainable.
Secretary Kennedy, just on a related matter, but somewhat distant. The former president of Harvard University, Larry Summers, who was Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, I'm sure you know Summers, Secretary under Bill Clinton, when they moved, they had great reforms on welfare. They moved from welfare to workfare. He's out there saying in the New York Times and elsewhere that the Medicaid reforms, the eligibility reforms for able-bodied, will cause 100,000 people to die. I mean, I think that's an outrageous, outrageous claim, Secretary Kennedy. What's your take on that? Can you fight back on that?
First of all, there's no cuts on Medicaid. There's a diminishment of the growth rate of Medicaid, which is bankrupting our country. And by the way, the national debt is also a social determinant of health. If we're leaving our kids with these giant debts, they can't afford health care. They can't afford good food. You know, in 1996, when Larry Summers was working for President Clinton, they put in the Tariffs program, they put in a work requirement, and it was regarded as one of the most successful poverty diminishment programs in the entire Clinton administration. Oh, you know, in recent years, Obamacare included Medicaid was designed, Larry, for people who were poor, for children, for mothers. And it was expanded during the Obamacare to include able-bodied Americans, and the growth rate went way up. The hospital services and doctor services are no longer available for the target population. This is not a good outcome, and we're bankrupting the states. It is the biggest expense for all of our states. They're all going bankrupt. We've got to do something to fix it. And luckily, we have a president who's willing to do that. We're not going to cut Medicaid, and there's nobody who's going to die from this.
That's right.
Well, I think Summers has a very bad case of amnesia, and I'm glad you pointed out the fiscal side of it. Madam Secretary, last one to you. Have you figured out a solution to the immigrant workers, the illegal immigrant workers in the travel industry, the hotel industry, meatpacking, farm? What's going to happen here, Brookie?
Well, the president has been unequivocal in his support of no amnesty, mass deportation. If you've broken the law, you've broken the law, while at the same time saying we have to do everything we can to protect our farmers and our farm workers. Secretary Lori Chavez DeRimmer, one of our colleagues from the cabinet who is really, really great, has opened up an Office of Immigration Policy over at Labor. She is really looking to solve this very, very quickly, but ultimately we have to move to a 100% American workforce. Now, a lot of this, Larry, I think you can appreciate, can be solved through automation. We are looking at that very closely and working with a lot of our great farmers around the country, but also ensuring we've got so many job openings in America. It actually may even go back to what Secretary Kennedy was talking about, the able-bodied men and women in America who are not working today. Now, will they be filling all of the farm openings? No, probably not. But this idea of dignity of work, Larry, you and I talked about a lot in the first Trump term. It's time to return to that theme and that great righteous vision of every man and woman in America having a job and having the ability to provide for their family. So there are a lot of solutions on the table, and we're moving forward.
All right. Secretary Kennedy, we appreciate it very much, sir. Secretary Rollins, we appreciate it very, very much. We'll talk some more on all this. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you,
Thank you, Larry.
Welcome back. Good Tuesday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Tuesday, July 15th. It is 7:02 on the East Coast. Americans can now use their rent payments and their crypto assets to help them qualify for a mortgage. That's under a new order from Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte, who heads up Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The order is leveraging Vantage Score credit ratings, taking rent payment history into account, instead of just the traditional FICO credit score. Joining me now is the man himself, FHFA Director Bill Pulte. Bill, thanks very much for being here. This is big news. How does it work?
Huge news. Well, President Trump signed this law into law in 2018, Maria. But go figure, Biden didn't do a damn thing about it. We came into office, and under President Trump's leadership, we executed on that legislation that Tim Scott led in 2018. And now Americans can qualify for a mortgage very shortly with their rent and with many other things. And frankly, in many ways, it's been shown that rent payments are actually more predictive than traditional ways that have been done. Now, some people like FICO have been upset and whatnot. I don't care. I care about the American people. We care about making the right decisions. We're going to follow the law. That's what we did. And this is going to be a huge boom for the American people. This is going to be very helpful for getting the American dream.
So I've got rent. I pay my rent on time every month. That will put me in better stead in terms of a mortgage application.
Well, think about it. It's just common sense, right? If somebody's been paying their rent for the last 10 years, that's highly predictive compared to some maybe, medical bill or some vehicle bill back in college that they had a hard time paying. I mean, if, somebody's a doctor and they've been paying rent for 10 years, we should be looking at that. So, look, these are all safe and sound practices. I actually think somebody said, oh, the default rate would go up. I actually think it would go down because you're getting the ability to look at more predictive things, in my opinion.
I like it. All right, let's talk about the Fed. President Trump says he would love it if the chairman, Jay Powell, resigned over him not cutting rates soon enough. And, of course, now this new story of him spending money on the buildings. Watch this.
The economy is roaring, business confidence is soaring, incomes are up, prices are down, and inflation is dead. It's dead. We have a bad Fed chairman, really bad. If he would lower the rates, and I tried being nice to the guy, it doesn't help. He's like a knucklehead. No, he's a knucklehead. A stupid guy. He really is. You know, each point, think of this, each point costs us $360 billion.
And that's the point, Bill. The president wants rates to come down to make it cheaper to hold all this debt. We've got $37 trillion in debt. You say you're encouraged that you think Powell will step down. What specifically do you believe is the catalyst? Is it because he spent that money on a renovation at the Federal Reserve?
Well, I can't get inside of his head, but I can tell you what I'm hearing is that he's considering it. I think he should consider it. I think he should consider it very soon. And frankly, I think you have a situation, Maria, where this building is going to be the end of his career. I mean, who the heck spends $2.5 billion on a renovation? Jay Powell has become a disgrace. He's not reading the room. He's not listening to our great president. We have the greatest president in the history of the country. We have the most popular president in the history of this country. Why is Jay Powell not reading the room and also realizing that he has gross mismanagement with this building? I think, Maria, when the facts come out about this building, you will see potentially fraud and many other things that have gone on. And we can't have this stuff in the government. The American people gave President Trump a mandate. They don't want fraud. They don't want all this other nonsense. And Jay Powell doesn't seem to give a damn. And in my opinion, he needs to be held accountable.
Well, look, the chairman is now asking the inspector general to actually review the spending on the buildings. Where is the fraud, do you think?
I think it's nonsense that he's doing that. He knows it's going to take a while. He's trying to delay. Who knows who this inspector general is, right? This just gets back to Jay Powell. He's very, in my opinion, very deceitful. And I think you've seen that through his actions. I mean, look, if the president comes to you and says, hey, I would like you to do something in terms of if it's in following the law and if, you know, he's the president of the United States and you're Jay Powell and he says, hey, I'd like for you to go. Why would you want to stay in that job? It just doesn't make any sense. The American people don't want it. I'll tell you this, Maria, the people on the internet and the base and, frankly, people from the other side want him gone.
Well, look, his term ends in May. We don't know who the president would like to appoint in the position. But, of course, an opening on the Fed is happening in January. One of the governors will be leaving. So that's one opening in January. And then the chairman's position, Powell's term ends in May. We don't know if President Trump's going to put in there Kevin Warsh or Kevin Hassett. But I spoke with Kevin Warsh, former governor, on Sunday, and asked him about the Fed's policy right now. Watch this. Look what just happened. The tariffs actually brought in $27 billion for the month, customs duties. You're talking about $100 billion on an annualized basis for tariffs. And we have a budget surplus for the month of June. Should the Federal Reserve be cutting interest rates right now?
So in a word, yes. Maria, it's quite simple. Why is it that money and financial conditions are so loose on Wall Street and considerably tighter on Main Street? Because the Fed has the policy mix exactly wrong. It has a big balance sheet like we're in the 08 crisis or the 2020 pandemic and has rates that are too high. It needs to shrink the Fed balance sheet and cut interest rates. In so doing, Main Street can get a much lower cost of credit. First-time home buyers can find their way into houses, and the policy mix would be right. I don't know if I'm just saying that because I grew up 200 miles from here in a sort of place far from the bright lights in big city. But Main Street needs to get its break, and it's high time they do it, and the Fed can be part of that.
Bill, I'll just point out that when I asked Kevin Warsh if he would consider taking the position on the board, governor, in January, then maybe becoming chairman in May, he didn't really bite at that one. He doesn't think he needs to try out. He's going to likely expect if the president wants him on the Fed, it'll be for chairman.
Well, President Trump has the best instincts. He has the best instincts, in my opinion, of any person that's ever lived. You just listen to his instincts, and it's like a supercomputer. It just spits it out. He'll figure out, frankly, who is the best person for this job. I'm very confident in it, and hopefully Jay Powell resigns sooner. I'm very confident he will. One thing I want to mention, Maria, is that in terms of inflation, housing and shelter, which obviously I help oversee with Fannie and Freddie, is a huge ingredient in inflation. And what happens actually when you increase interest rates is you've actually increased, believe it or not, the inflation of housing, in my view, because people don't want to build homes. Home builders aren't wanting to build right now. They're constraining supply. They're constraining inventory. And when builders constrain inventory, that limits supply, and our demand is going up. It's just basic math. So these are things that are really hurting the American people, and Jay Powell just seems completely blind to it, kind of like he was blind to this $2.5 billion building that is a mess.
Well, and also blind to all the spending on the Democrats' watch, right? What did they spend? $7 trillion, and that's why inflation shot up to 40-year highs. But, you know, Bill, I mean, the Fed can come back, Jay Powell can come back and say, look, we have a mandate. Our mandate is employment growth and inflation. And we are focused on those two things as our mandate. We're not focused on debt. But, you know, my argument is, well, you have to. It's all related. So President Trump has $36+ trillion in debt. The United States has that debt. And he's got $9 trillion rolling over this year. He wants interest rates to come down so that it's not so costly to hold that debt. We spend more on the interest on the debt than we do on defense spending, Bill. But the argument at the Fed is that's not our mandate. That's Congress's spending.
Well, even if you take his mandate that it's to reduce inflation or keep inflation to 2%, it's at 2%. I mean, in some cases, it might be lower. If you look at the run rate for the last 3 months, it's like 1.6%. So it's complete nonsense what Jay Powell is doing. He was silent during all of the so-called policy decisions that he always remains silent on. But somehow he invents and hallucinates something with tariffs. I mean, he really is hallucinating with regard to tariffs. Nobody, you know, it's like going into a room and you see a ghost. He says there's a ghost. Nobody sees the ghost except for Jerome Powell. This inflation thing with regard to tariffs is complete nonsense. It's not backed up by data. It's not backed up by math. And frankly, I think it's gross negligence. So you have that, and then you have this stuff with the building. I think the building is going to get, I think you're going to see stuff that we didn't even think before. I don't know if you saw this, Maria, real quick, but they said yesterday in their FAQ that they don't have any new or renovated dining rooms, but they have rooms for, quote, they're renovating rooms for, quote, mealtime meetings. I mean, this is the level of deceit and fraud, in my opinion, that Jay Powell is perpetrating over there, and there's no signs that he's going to stop without intervention, and so I hope Congress holds him accountable.
We'll be watching this, certainly. Good to see you. Bill Pulte joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump giving Russian President Vladimir Putin a 50-day deadline to end the war. The president is threatening 100% secondary tariffs on Russia's trade partners if a deal is not reached. This goes right to China, right to India. If you buy oil from Russia and this war is still going on, you'll face the 100% tariff. It comes on the heels of the president making a deal with NATO countries for our European allies to buy billions of dollars in American weapons from our U.S. makers and distribute those weapons to Ukraine. Interesting deal the president has come up with. Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst. He's chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with us. General, great to see you. You predicted a deal just like this on Sunday Morning Futures over the weekend. You predicted it. It actually materialized. Your reaction to what the president is doing here?
Well, certainly this is a major turning point, Maria, in the relationship between the United States and Russia, and also the United States' relationship to the war itself. I mean, frankly, President Trump has tried for a very long time, several months, to get a diplomatic deal with Putin, just to simply go to a 30-day ceasefire, and could not get that. And he recognizes that that's likely not going to happen unless he takes some pretty tough action. And that tough action begins with the weapons and the ammunition. And clearly the thing that he wants to do, get these weapons in the hands of the Ukrainian military to protect themselves, to help successfully defend against Russia's offensive operation, which they've been doing remarkably well at, but they need to be strengthened. And secondly, and in particularly, protect the citizens of Ukraine who are being every single night attacked through the air. And we've seen the scale and magnitude of those attacks day in and day out, and the casualties that are being produced. So those are the two major things that is happening militarily. And then he wants to keep the American taxpayer out of this, no longer pay for any of this. And that is why the deal with NATO countries, they will buy those weapons from the United States and then give them to Ukraine or sell them to Ukraine, depending on what Ukraine's funding capabilities are and what the particular weapons are. Major turning point. in the war, and something Putin will pay a lot of attention to. And then the second thing is a warning. Crippling sanctions and tariffs are coming if you don't come to the negotiating table and work a deal with me. So, yes, a turning point in the war has taken place here, and I think it's very welcome based on the realities of where we are with Putin and Russia.
Yeah, and it's a twofer, because it's not just, you know, sending the weapons to Ukraine, but it's our NATO allies buying them from the United States. So that's a twofer that puts America first, right in step with President Trump's agenda. But look, I mean, I don't want to be around to find out what happens next if, in fact, this war is not over in 50 days. The last time the president made such a threat was to Iran, giving them a 60-day period to actually come to the table and stop the attacks on Israel. And look what happened there. Iran is holding talks today with Russia and China, General, on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. They're seeking support following the U.S. strikes on the nuclear sites, Iran vowing retaliation if the UN Security Council imposes any further sanctions on Iran, like halting Tehran's nuclear development. This is an Iranian crowdfunding campaign, claims they've raised more than $40 million as a reward for assassinating President Trump. The Secret Service responding, quote, "We operate in a heightened and very dynamic threat environment, and the safety and security of the president and all of our protectees remain our highest priority." General, what do you think about this?
Well, a couple of points there. First of all, on the snapback sanctions, as they're so-called, when the deal was formulated 10 years ago in 2015, the signatories to the deal, the United States, the UK, Germany, France, China, and Russia, put into the deal that if Iran didn't comply with the deal, any one of those member countries, not all of them collectively, just any one of them, could start snapback sanctions on Iran in not conforming. Iran is not conforming to the deal. It's unlikely China and Russia would take any action against them, obviously. The United States is no longer a part of the nuclear deal or the so-called JCPOA, but Germany, France, and the United Kingdom are. Any one of those countries, prior to October, could begin the snapback sanctions, which would have significant impact on Iran. They want no part of that. So that's where we're facing, and hopefully that gets done. The second thing you're mentioning is the threat against President Trump. There is a website called the Blood Covenant. It was formed by an Iranian national citizen who used to work for their propaganda network, that have people come to that website and donate funding, supposedly raising about $40 million. I'm skeptical about all of that, because this is a person who's in charge of propaganda for the government at one point.
Yeah.
And to threaten to use that as a reward for somebody to assassinate the president. We know Iran has a history of desiring to assassinate the president. That means our counterintelligence network, their antennas are up, Maria, in dealing with this. And this is just another indicator. This isn't a plot that's taken place and the counterintelligence agency is concerned about it. This is a propaganda machine. They'll look at it, they'll watch it, and see if anything materializes as a result of it. Listen, as we all know, there's been 2 serious attempts made on President Trump's life. The Secret Service and our counterintelligence agencies are completely focused on protecting the president here.
Yeah.
And we've learned a lot from the debacle that took place, certainly in Butler. And we, in terms of our government agencies, and I'm confident they're all over this, as well as the general threat from Iran.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I didn't know how serious to take this, because the Iranians have talked about putting a target on the president's back now for years. They did so with Mike Pompeo. They also did so with Benjamin Netanyahu. I asked the Prime Minister of Israel about it this last week. Watch this.
The Iranian regime put another fatwa on the back of President Trump. And they said that they are calling on Muslims to take down President Trump. How serious should we be taking this?
Fully. They just did that in the last few days. And by the way, President Trump and me. I think the price on our heads is somewhat different, I have to say, naturally. No, I'm not joking. I think this is very serious. They mean it. they are threatening to murder him and murder me. But this is the kind of people we're dealing with. They're enemies of America. They're enemies of everything we stand for. They want to throw the world back into a terrible, terrible era, you know, sort of a primitive and violent dark Middle Ages. And the people of Iran deserve better.
Meanwhile, the ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas seem to be dragging. Hamas made all these new demands. They rejected the latest deal, saying the discussions are on the verge of collapse. Do you expect, real quick, General, do you expect a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas?
Well, certainly we're hoping so, but usually these things are tough to come by, largely because Hamas. The major dispute is over where should the Israeli troops be during the 60-day ceasefire. The Israelis want to maintain a corridor, the Marak corridor north of Rafah, outposted east to west, straight across the peninsula of Gaza. And Hamas wants all the troops to withdraw to the periphery of Gaza. That's the major impediment. There's a couple of other more minor ones. It remains to be seen. Hamas is the stumbling block here for sure.
All right, we'll leave it there. General, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great talking to you, Maria, as always.
And to you, General Jack Keane.
So President Trump has lost his patience with Putin and is ending Joe Biden's appeasement, and that is the subject of the Riff. In today's dramatic press conference with NATO head Mark Rutte, President Trump made it very clear that he has lost patience with Putin, believes Putin can no longer be trusted, and is now arranging a significant sale of Patriot missiles to NATO, which will then send them over to Ukraine. Basically, we're sending the weapons, and the Europeans are going to pay for them. Ukraine will be rearmed in a significant way, and perhaps that will finally bring Putin to the negotiating table. Putin made a big mistake trying to play Donald Trump. He can't do it. After 3 or 4 ceasefire-related phone calls, or who knows how many, Putin then goes back and starts bombing Ukraine's civilians. That's an absolute no-go for Mr. Trump. Now, once again, here's how Mr. Trump put it at this morning's presser.
How did you tell Putin this was coming?
I speak to him a lot about getting this thing done. And I always hang up and say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. I go home, I tell the First Lady, you know, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. At a certain point, you know, ultimately talk doesn't talk. It's got to be action. It's got to be results.
Yes, good for Melania. Anyway, Trump made it absolutely clear that he wants the war to stop and that he inherited Joe Biden's war. Trump believes, and I'm sure he's right, that Putin just waited for Biden to come into office and then he invaded Ukraine. Certainly, Biden's decision to flee from Afghanistan had a lot to do with Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. And we can all remember how pathetic Biden's response was as hundreds of thousands of Russian troops amassed on the eastern border of Ukraine when Biden then said, and I'm going to quote, don't, end quote, don't, which, as one wag put it, is what you say to your dog who's pulling a sock away. Don't didn't stop Putin, and nothing else Biden did stopped Putin. And Biden's appeasement with Iran didn't stop Putin, nor his appeasement with China. Trump is really the first president since Ronald Reagan with an effort to check Russia and its grandiose empire ambitions. Mr. Trump also announced a 100% secondary tariff on Russia, but not for 50 days. Personally, I think it should be much shorter, period. Also impressive was NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, a former conservative prime minister of the Netherlands and a Trump friend and ally. But even more than that, the NATO countries agreed with President Trump to seek defense spending of 5% of GDP, which will send a strong, tough message to Vladimir Putin's phony ambitions. More than any time I can remember, the U.S. is now working in tandem with Europe. Now, there will always be differences, of course, but interestingly, in response to a question on tariffs, Mr. Trump reiterated his 30% EU tariff proposal, but clearly suggested that it was a work in progress and trade negotiations are continuing. By the by, Both the stock market and the dollar rallied over the course of the Trump-Rutte press conference. More than anything, Mr. Trump wants peace, not war. He tried to negotiate with Putin, but didn't work out. He has inherited a war that would never have happened if Joe Biden were any kind of a strong president. But Biden was a weakling, an appeaser, and Trump has to pick up the pieces and end this Russian problem. If the United States and the NATO countries of Europe do act in concert, new weapons and all, it will mark the first major show of strength against the dictator Vladimir Putin. And it's high time that this happens. And that's the Riff. All right, folks, it's now 4:07 p.m., and President Trump still has not fired Jay Powell. And that's the subject of the Riff. As of this reporting, on July 16th, a little after 4 on the East Coast, President Trump is not going to fire Fed head Jay Powell. And there was never any drafted letter to fire Powell. Just in case you missed this story, here's a few comments from Mr. Trump. Please take a listen.
Do you have plans, or if you're back considering firing Jerome Powell?
No, we're not planning on doing it. So he's doing a lousy job, but no, I'm not talking about that. I don't rule out anything, but I think it's highly unlikely. Unless he has to leave.
Have you drafted a letter?
I haven't drafted a letter.
So you didn't
I think he's a total stiff. But the one thing I didn't see him as a guy that needed a palace to live in. You talk to the guy, it's like talking to a nothing. It's like talking to a chair. No personality, no high intelligence, no nothing.
Talking to a chair. How about that? I doubt if there are any fraud charges that are going to wind up sticking to Jay Powell's Taj Mahal on the Potomac. In a very long FAQ of frequently asked questions published by the Fed, they made it clear that while they do work cooperatively with the National Capital Planning Commission, the board generally is not subject to direction from the NCPC. And the review authorities are, quote unquote, advisory only. But it's a major embarrassment for the Fed in an era where the new zeitgeist is to downsize the federal government rather than make it palatial. President Trump and DOJ aim to significantly reduce the federal headcount, stop using buildings or spaces that are cost inefficient, and in general, curtail the power of the deep state. Unfortunately, Jay Powell and the Fed are infected by deep state anti-Trump sympathies, but his term will finally end next spring. And Treasury man Scott Bessent has a process to choose a new Fed chair. Meanwhile, the biggest issue is how well the U.S. economy is doing without inflation. Since January, the CPI has increased only 1.8% at an annual rate. And as I told Edward Lawrence, the producer price index has increased only 0.2% at an annual rate. And there is no convincing evidence that tariffs are inflationary. In fact, tariff revenues are coming in at about a $300 billion clip for this fiscal year. And that's going to reduce the deficit by a significant amount. Meanwhile, the true cause of across-the-board inflation is always a combination of excess government spending and excess Federal Reserve money printing. So here are some positive facts. Federal spending has slowed to only 4.2% over the past year, and even as a share of GDP, it's actually declined from 24.5% in 2024 to 23.5% through the second quarter of 2025. Meanwhile, the M2 money supply only rising at a 4.5% pace over the past year. Those are counter-inflationary macro numbers. And on top of that, the one big beautiful bill is basically a pro-growth supply-side formula of lower taxes and lower regulations. Not only will that add to higher real wages for working folks, but it will increase productivity as new factories are being built and onshoring investment is coming to America. The AI revolution adds to productivity, and we are already in the midst of a tremendous business investment boom. All of that is also counter-inflationary. And every one of these reasons argues strongly that the Fed's target interest rate should be coming down, as President Trump himself has argued. You'd think with all those economists at the Fed in their new palace at Versailles, somebody would at least understand some of this good news. Unfortunately, we're going to have to live with Chairman Chair for a few more months. And that's the Riff. All right.
Welcome back. 1789 Capital founder Omid Malik's company, Colombier Acquisitions, acquiring online firearm retailer Grab a Gun. And after a SPAC merger, the company will go public today under the ticker symbol PEW, Pew. Colombier expecting more than $179 million in gross proceeds at the closing bell tonight, if not more. Joining me now is 1789 Capital founder Omid Malik, along with Trump Organization Executive Vice President and 1789 Capital partner Donald Trump Jr. Gentlemen, congratulations from the New York Stock Exchange. So nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, and you're about to ring the opening bell to take your company public, Grab a Gun. Omid, one thing that you've noted is that this is one of the most successful SPAC deals because you haven't seen any redemptions, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Maria. When we came on your show to announce this deal, as you recall, in January, I told you that we found one of the best businesses in this space that was making about $100 million a year, was already profitable, but we were going to do three things. We were going to take them public on the New York Stock Exchange, check. We were going to deliver them $170 million, which we did, check. We didn't get any redemptions. Usually these things have like 99% redemptions. We had 0%. And that's because the people support what we're doing, supporting the Second Amendment, which is what, as you know, Don and I have been doing for the last 5 years, is bringing these kinds of products to the people that believe in them and allowing them to make their own decisions to support things that have been stifled. And then finally, we were going to make this company a household name, and I think we've done that. So we're thrilled that we were able to partner with Grab a Gun and get them public today here in your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that, Don. Grab a Gun. I mean, what are you going to do with the money raised? How do you allocate that money when all is said and done?
Well, this is a little bit, this is my backyard, this is my wheelhouse, and so I think they're going to take that money, use it to acquire other companies in the space, people that have done great jobs, but perhaps don't have that ability to grow the same way. So I see it as a great consolidating effort in the gun space to be able to come back to the New York Stock Exchange and actually take a gun company public. Feels like such a vindication of all of the insanity, all of the woke nonsense that we've been watching and facing for the last decade in America. And so I think it's an ultimate triumphant return. So we're just super excited about the opportunity.
And in terms of growth of Grab a Gun, Don, where is that going? What's the overall growth strategy at the company? What do you want to do?
Listen, the reality, we're going to use a tech platform, a tech stack that's really going to be able to perform better than anyone else. When you look at the people who are now buying guns, people buy everything online. Everything's a click away. We're actually enabling so many people to not have to go into the gun store the way they had for women and young people that are getting into the game. That's a little bit more intimidating than someone that's a little bit more of an old hand going into that. For them to be able to buy things the way they buy everything brings everyone else into this market. That's going to be super exciting. Obviously, you have to go through your federal firearms license and all of the other things because there's a lot of misnomers about how that happens. But we're excited about being able to open up this space, and over the last few years we've seen the reasons that people want to be able to defend themselves and exercise their Second Amendment rights. So being able to do that as well as capitalize this company is a great honor and something I'm really proud of. Well, and by the way, Maria, it's a huge TAM. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
It's a $25 billion TAM, and it's been suppressed. So what we're doing here with this transaction is unleashing the desire for people that already exists now. You have 1 out of every 2 households in America has a firearm. We have a Second Amendment right. Yet private actors, often at the behest of the federal government, have been suppressing that right. And so what Don and I have done is circumvented those gatekeepers who are self-appointed and have allowed an industry to grow the way it should be able to.
Yeah.
And that's really the ethos of everything we do.
Well, you're right. And I think, John, you made the right point. I mean, it is a sign of the times that your company called Grab a Gun can be where it is today in terms of success and going public on the New York Stock Exchange. It's huge. But it is becoming something that people want to understand more about and protect themselves. I was taking gun lessons myself over the last couple of years, and I'm glad that I did, because I needed to understand the basics, and it's important for most people to understand the basics of handling a gun safely. One issue that President Trump campaigned on included pushing DEI out of all aspects of American life. Don, you mentioned that a minute ago. He's succeeding in that. Omid and Don, you say you're investing in the companies who've been sidelined by woke capitalism, right?
Well, our entire business thesis, and we've been doing it before it became popular, before others jumped back in and said, well, maybe there's a way to make a profit. We did this when other people wouldn't even look at these companies, when essentially half of the nation was totally ostracized. They were either debanked, they were de-insured, they were de-everything. And so we took a contrarian approach to everything that was going on, and we wanted to fund these great American businesses, make sure they had the same opportunity, and really democratize the capital markets. And that's what we're doing with all of this. You see a lot of other people trying to jump on, again, for a quick buck or a profit, but those people turned their backs on these very ideas, our very freedoms, for the last decade. I think we actually have incredible credibility with these people that we are there. We're doing it for real. We were doing it when it wasn't expedient, when it wasn't popular, when frankly people thought we were nuts to do it. But these are fundamental rights that we're there to protect, and that's the thesis of 1789 Capital. It's the year of the Bill of Rights. That's what we believe in, and that's what we're going to support.
We're not going to stop, by the way. We're just getting warmed up. I mean, I would just say, if you look at what we did 2 years ago, basically to the day, we ensured transactional freedom with Public Square when we rang the bell,
That's right.
as you know. You covered that as well, and that was allowing people to buy goods from American companies and also process payments in areas like the Second Amendment that have also been deplatformed. And then now we're going and protecting things like the Second Amendment. His father protected the First Amendment with True Social and taking the public. And the next thing that we're looking at is we want to re-industrialize the United States. Everything that his father is doing in government, we need more private sector leaders stepping up and complementing that effort. And I think today, with the listing of Pew, does that, I think, exquisitely.
Let me move on to the crypto space, because, Don, the House is expected to vote again today on the landmark cryptocurrency bills to boost America's digital dominance. They failed to advance the bills to the debate stage yesterday, and the president met with a number of holdouts. He wrote on Truth Social, after a short discussion, they have all agreed to vote tomorrow morning in favor of the rule. The Speaker of the House was at the meeting via telephone. He looks forward to taking the vote as early as possible. Got the Clarity Act, the Genius Act, and the Anti-Central Bank Digital Currency Surveillance State Act, all to create a more structured and transparent digital market. Don, what do you want to say to the Democrats in the Senate who right now are demanding that there are ethics protections for crypto that would probably impact your crypto endeavors, the family's crypto endeavors, Don?
Well, listen, I imagine the reason the Democrats want regulation on crypto is they want control. We want to democratize finance. I think that's what crypto is doing. We got involved in cryptocurrencies, not necessarily because we were on the leading edge of that. We got on that because we were debanked. We couldn't get loans. We couldn't get people to call us back. The reality is, I said conventional finance. When I was a real estate guy in New York, there wasn't a single person that I couldn't call on any given day to get a loan for a building. We got political, and all of a sudden those went away. You couldn't get a loan for your home. It was phony. You realize that you were just the top of a big Ponzi scheme, which was the conventional banking system. And so what we're doing with World Liberty Finance and a decentralized finance platform, what we're doing with American Bitcoin, both from a store of value as well as trading on conventional finance and re-upping that game. We're democratizing finance. Democrats are against that because they want control. They want to have that power. They don't want people to be able to do what they want with their money. And that's a fundamental tenet. It's why they lost so much of big tech, because the second they lost any kind of control, all of a sudden the people that funded them for years were persona non grata. It's very typical for the Democrats to be doing something like that, and it's exactly why I think so many Americans are excited about the future. The reality is this is going to be the future of finance. It should be domiciled in America. Before this, we were giving the world every excuse to create trillions of dollars of value offshore. We want to bring that back in America. We want to create the guardrails that allows that to be done properly in America, where finance belongs.
No, it's a good point, and it's the point that Paul Atkins made, this SEC chairman, when he joined me just a few weeks ago. But look, the Democrats are still scrambling to unite and find a message. I mean, you've got Mamdani running around, and the leading candidate for the mayor of New York. What do you think he would say to see you guys up there right now in terms of, the face of capitalism?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm sure he'd have an issue with that, but I think the Democrats are frankly more concerned about making sure that men can play in women's sports, so I don't really take anything they say all that seriously.
Oh, Omid, let's wrap this up on your thoughts on the growth story of grab a gun. What kind of growth level should investors expect?
Well, look, I think Don touched on it, but I think what people need to understand now that we've had this successful transaction is what does the future look like? I've already established to you that this is a massive TAM, that there's a ton of demand for it, but what the problem has been with it is that it's been stifled. So you needed an incumbent to step up who's actually well capitalized, and now we had that finally. A company with hundreds of millions on its balance sheet, that's public, has that currency, can now go around and be that consolidator. I'm thrilled that not only do they have a good leadership team, but you should check out their new board, which includes Don. They're going to be the repository for every one of these companies. There are dozens upon dozens of profitable, great businesses that are looking for a home.
Yeah.
Grab-A-Gun can now be that consolidator for an entire industry, and I'm thrilled about that. And you'll see that, I think, hopefully in the share price today.
Well, I've got to tell you, I mean, we are at a moment in time right now where the growth is incredible when you look at so many pockets of the economy. And Don, you're living it with your crypto ventures. We just had the CEO of CoreWeave on, and he said he has never seen the kind of environment that he's seen right now. Whereas the amount of scale that is needed to actually meet the demand because of AI and so many other areas that are growth stories. So it certainly feels like the future is bright with regard to these new businesses.
Very much so. And once they get the energy supply to be able to handle all the things going on in AI, crypto, I mean, we're on the leading edge of all of that right now. And again, that should be here in America. We should be the leaders of that, and that's going to fuel our future.
Yeah, and last thing I'd say, Maria, is what we're doing is we're taking something that has been done in every other industry, and we're bringing it to guns. So remember, you've seen what happened with companies like Chewy, with pet food, with Wayfair, with furniture, and obviously with Amazon, which is the king of it. But why wouldn't you have that in a place with guns as well, which is as big as it is? They should also enter the 21st century. So that's what we've done with Grab-A-Gun.
People want to make sure that the safety and security of handling a gun is also embedded in this. Because the name Grab-A-Gun, Don, I mean, is there any, I mean, have you heard criticism? I mean, the critics say, you know, it's a bit cavalier when talking about a firearm.
Listen, everyone has their opinions on that. The reality, you go through your federal firearms license. The reality is most people just don't understand how that process actually works. There's all these sound bites that have been pushed by the mainstream media that has been very anti-Second Amendment for decades that actually have no bearing in truth and reality. So again, if you're ordering a gun online, it's going to a federal firearms license holder. It gets picked up there. That's where your background checks happen. Now, if you're ordering ammunition or targets or other accessories, that can be shipped to your door like anything else. So again, any of that confusion is generally based on just a total lack of understanding of how these things really work. You know, that's carried a lot of weight because the media repeats the narrative, but like most narratives, we all understand that just because they say it doesn't mean it's true.
I'm glad that you laid that out, Don. Very well done. Great to see you, gentlemen. We'll be watching you ring the opening bell in about 40 minutes' time. We'll see you soon. Donald Trump Jr. and Omid Malik. We'll be right back.
What the president is doing is saying that education needs to be returned to the states, that where education is best taught and is best understood, where it's closest to the child. He wants parental rights protected. He wants to make sure that students are not trapped in failing schools.
Another Supreme Court victory for President Trump. Justices giving the green light for the White House to dismantle the Department of Education and proceed with mass layoffs. Trump celebrating this win on Truth Social, writing this. The Supreme Court has handed a victory to parents and students by returning the Education Department's functions back to the states. The federal government has been running our education system into the ground, but we're going to turn it around by giving power back to the people. And there's a large swath of the country that would love to see this, Brian. They really think everything's been mishandled. But this is also, so there's two issues here. One, the power going back to the states, but also, again, the Supreme Court issuing this ruling to Trump and showing that lower courts just...
You should be able to dismantle a division of the government if you're the President of the United States. I know Justice Sotomayor feels differently. I understand that. A couple of things. Linda McMahon when she got her job, goes, I'm looking to put myself out of business.
Right.
She's been the most consequential, one of the most consequential secretaries, been helping me out and helping out Long Island, taking on the politically correct name of the chiefs and the warriors and doing that hard work there, now suing and getting American Indians involved, to actually taking on the elite education that's saying there's too many foreign students and the anti-Semitism won't last and the curriculum better be diversified. But I personally, fundamentally, still have not had it effectively explained to me that if you're upset by the way education is done in our country, that the American history is not taught and kids aren't functioning, we're not getting the results, how does lessening control help you? Because Chicago's only going to get worse. The people that have a different philosophy are only going to go more in that direction because they're going to get free from oversight.
I think the answer to that is they just really don't give a damn, and they say they do, but they don't. And the stupider American kids get, the more power and control they get, and that's why they want the status quo to remain. Mark Andreessen, one of Dagan's favorites, in a leaked message said this. Let's see. He torched the top universities, saying they've, quote, declared war on 70% of the country. That's just the university aspect of it. On the primary education aspect of it, Brian, we've talked about this a lot. Give parents school choice. Give them the opportunity not to pay taxes that go to an education system they don't like, and they can homeschool or they can go to private school. But the wokesters who are controlling the system and brainwashing the kids, they don't want that, because if you have choice, you will exercise that option.
Well, what Trump's doing is he's trying to push this down to the state level. So, like in Chicago.
But some states, he's not going to want it at the state level.
No. But here's, so you push it down to the state level and say, you guys have to figure this out. The beauty of doing it at the state level is people can vote with their feet. Okay? So if you send it to Chicago and Chicago says, no school choice, we love the way it's always been done, it just creates more incentive for people to leave that state. I mean, like, the Department of Education was providing any useful oversight for American education. I mean, if they were doing anything, we wouldn't have Chicago's. And in fact, I mean, in my, this is a university level, but my experience with the Department of Education and the federal bureaucracy, period, is they didn't help you at all. They put restrictions in your way and regulations and rules. You got to start letting these people use that bathroom. And we're not going to give you any, we're not going to approve your accreditation if you're a religious component to your school. All of that stuff. How did that help education in America? To me, I'm saying devolve it. Devolve it and let them deal with it at that level.
Is a cesspool. And if you choose to live there and you want to go down that route, more power to you. I mean, that's not my issue. But I just think that this offers red states more of an opportunity to change the system a little.
I agree. But to play devil's advocate, let me agree with Brian. No, I'm going to try to agree with you. I actually, in theory,
still the devil,
though. Brian, agree. School choice, and as a parent, I want to control with the voucher where my child goes. But if we talk about Chicago or inner city New York, the poor kids don't have the opportunity to leave. The wealthy can move. I can go to Jersey, I can go to Florida, whatever. An inner city black kid in Chicago, his mom can't move to the suburb with the nice school. So he's trapped there, that little kid. That is a death sentence for that kid to be trapped there. What then when that just gets worse as the wealthy leave and leave?
No, I agree, but the DOE has provided cover for local districts to do the things that are destroying education.
But why not fix the DOE then?
Because we are fixing it. We don't need a DOE to provide oversight. They've never provided oversight for schools such that they've made schools better. Since 1979, where have test scores gone, up or down? Have they ever gone up? Have they ever gotten better? They've always gotten worse. It's the wrong mechanism. It assumes the government can do a parent's job, and that's never going to work.
Or make the tests easier.
Yeah, there you go.
That's not going to help. Take
I will eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because I find it so delicious what the Trump administration has tried to do to the elitist hate cult indoctrination.
Awesome. I never thought they could.
At the universities. You mentioned that what Mark Andreessen said. Here's just the quote of what he was talking about. Stanford University and MIT are operating as, quote, mainly political lobbying operations fighting American innovation. That look at the sharp rise in foreign enrollment at top universities. You look at foreign enrollment rates at the biggest universities that went from 2 to, say, 4% 50 years ago. They are now 27, 30%, 50%. There's the fundamental question. What level of untapped talent exists in this country that a combination of DEI and immigration have basically cut out of the loop for the last 50 years? And how long can we have this story to everybody in the Midwest and in the South that says, sorry, because of historical oppression, your kids are out of luck? That's what these universities have done. And the tech companies know it because they're the ones that hired these left-wing nut anarchists out of these universities in like between 08 and 11 and came into the companies, and they saw them, as Andreessen himself said, join tech companies to figuratively burn them to the ground. That said, why are there so many white men on your board? Why are you a for-profit company? You better stop emitting carbon. And all of the tech executives, the people who founded these companies, knew that what these universities were up to, and they kept hiring people from them. Just stop hiring people. You know what? Starve them. These tech companies have the ability, these large American companies have the ability to starve these universities. Stop hiring from them. Start hiring out of high school. Go into the South and the Midwest and give somebody with who's 18 with a brain a chance. You train them. Don't hire somebody with a Harvard degree. Screw Harvard.
I'm glad I have a job, though.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Or MIT, or Yale, or I could go on.
China's biggest exporters are rushing to make deals and get orders out before President Trump's next tariff deadline. Beijing reporting its exports jumped 5.8% in June. Exporters trying to take advantage of the trade truce with the U.S., but countries are scrambling to make trade concessions with the president by August 1st. Global story. China facing an August 12th deadline. Trade tensions also building between Beijing and the EU. They exchange accusations and import curbs over each other's trade practices. Joining me now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. And Gordon, help me kind of parse the rhetoric out of the Europeans this morning, because Italy's foreign minister, who by the way is going to be in D.C. today, he gave an interview this morning, and he and others have talked about maybe the EU working with the Asia-Pacific countries, a.k.a. China. Let's read between the lines here. Working with India, because they're in this trade fight with Donald Trump. But at the same time, there's tension, reportedly, as I just mentioned in the intro to you, between the Europeans and China. How is this all playing out? It seems like a mad scramble.
Good morning, Cheryl. And it is a mass scramble. But the one thing we're not seeing is we're not seeing the Europeans imposing counter tariffs and retaliatory measures on the United States. And that is critical because Europe especially needs the American market. They just can't replace it, especially in timeframes that would be meaningful. So, that is, I think, going to be the most important thing. The other thing is that, yes, Europe can threaten to have relations with China, but China's been proving resistant on trade, as you point out. Also, there is a new realization in Brussels about how China is threatening Europe because it's backing Russia. We heard those very important comments from Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, to the EU foreign policy chief about how China cannot let Russia lose. Well, that's really affecting the EU's position on trade as well. So, yes, there's a lot of noise, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is that everybody needs the U.S. consumer market.
Yeah, and that's something that Donald Trump has said repeatedly, President Trump. And I want to correct myself. It was EU competition chief Teresa Ribera that said that they're looking to deepen trade agreements with India and other countries in the Asia-Pacific region. That was a Bloomberg interview this morning. And that kind of leads into this because the U.S. reportedly is putting pressure on their allies, Japan and Australia, to clarify what role they're going to play in any potential conflict between China and Taiwan. Senior Pentagon official Elbridge Colby responding directly to the Financial Times report, writing on X, quote, "We at DoD are focused on implementing the president's America First common sense agenda of restoring deterrence and achieving peace through strength. That includes by urging allies to step up their defense spending and other efforts related to our collective defense. Gordon, your reaction.
Well, that's a really important statement from Elbridge Colby. And the reason is that China is threatening everybody, and it could happen at any moment. Now, of course, Australia and Japan, which really have been the two targets of the Pentagon when it comes to clarifying their position on Taiwan, well, Japan and Australia have been dragging their feet. And at this moment, we have the Australian Prime Minister Albanese in Beijing saying all these nice things about China. Well, if he's going to do that, then I think that it's important for us to understand where he is. We have mutual defense obligations to defend not only Australia, but also Japan. And so we need to know where they will be should the Chinese, as they threaten, invade Taiwan.
Yeah, well, and there's a new op-ed in The Guardian this morning that claims, quote, the world must be more wary than ever of China's growing economic power, shifting from military power to economic power. They say it matters because the aim of Beijing's autocratic regime undermine the economic and political resources of the rest of the world. Without tough action, its voracious appetite for resources, information, and intellectual capital will eat all of us. What do you make of that, Gordon?
Well, first of all, I think that's overestimating China. And yes, in a few hours, they will report Q2 GDP growth of above 5%. But there is this very interesting pattern of China actually over-reporting June results in order to justify a good GDP report. But, you know, the important thing, though, is that China does pose an existential threat to free societies. And yes, President Trump gets an A for opposing China behind the scenes, but we need an all-of-society defense against China. And we're not going to get it until the President of the United States talks to all of society in candid terms about China's threat. So, yes, I think Western leaders need to start to get off their very nice rhetoric about China and actually be candid. And that includes the Australian Prime Minister, who I said is already in Beijing and saying very nice things about Xi Jinping, although the Chinese are threatening Australia at this moment.
Well, that's probably, I would think, the wrong tactic to take. You know, you want to, it's peace through strength. Again, as we've heard from President Trump. Liz Peek, jump in here.
Good morning, Gordon. I think the question is what you referred to earlier. Is China's economy, are they still so essential to Europe that Europe is going to go along with all the trade requirements and trade demands of China? In other words, today in the FT, there's talking about the EU going after subsidies. This is obviously an ongoing issue. China subsidizing lots of its own industries, particularly the automobile industry. Is the EU finally going to get tough about this?
Well, the question is Germany going to get tough about this?
Yeah.
And with the new chancellor, I think the answer is probably yes. And the reason is Volkswagen is having a hard time in China. Volkswagen was traditionally the car leader in China, #1 year in, year out. And now Volkswagen's ratings are slipping in China, as are Tesla's and every other foreign car maker. So I think that that's starting to affect the way Berlin looks at this. And the way Berlin looks at this is the way the EU looks at it. So, yes, I think it'll be a much tougher EU position because Germany is suffering.
Gordon Chang, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.
All right.